Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th installment of the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policies Climate Change Solutions, Frontline Perspectives from Around the Globe webinar series. My name is Jonathan Smith, and I will be hosting the webinar today. The Center and our partners at World Resources Institute and the Environmental Defense Fund are very excited to welcome Mr. Nobuo Tanaka of the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan, for today's webinar. The Climate Change Solutions webinar series is designed to highlight climate policy developments in each of the 10 highest carbon-emitting nations of the world. We hope that delving into the climate actions of each of these key nations will help share climate change solutions across the globe. Today, Mr. Tanaka will be focusing on the energy policy of Japan and Asia more broadly. Just a bit of logistics before we pass the microphone to Mr. Tanaka. Hopefully you can all hear me and have connected to the webinar by integrated VoIP under the Communicate menu in your WebEx window. We are going to have a question and answer session in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the webinar, so please write down your questions into the chat panel on your right side of your screen during the presentation. We will compile them and ask them at the end. Feel free to include your name, affiliation, and/or location when asking your questions. We would also like to note that Mr. Tanaka will be streaming video during the presentation, and this video should be streaming in the panel at the right side of your webinar window right now. Now, to introduce our speaker, Mr. Nobuo Tanaka is currently the Global Associate for Energy Security and Sustainability at the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan, a role he has occupied since September of 2011. From 2007 to 2011, he was Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. During his tenure, he was responsible for pioneering the concept of comprehensive energy security, while also expanding the agency's focus on climate change, renewable energy, and the transition to a low-carbon energy economy. Mr. Tanaka began his career in the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Tokyo, and has also served as Minister for Industry, Trade and Energy at the Embassy of Japan in the United States, and is both Deputy Director and Director for Science, Technology and Industry at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So without further ado, here is Mr. Tanaka.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning or good evening or good afternoon. I don't know where you are, but thank you very much for inviting me to talk to all of you. As I was introduced, my career started with Japanese government, METI, Ministry of Trade Industry, but I experienced lots of the foreign assignment in Washington, Paris, so I'm very often called as foreigner in Japan. But now, much more than ever, that we need a kind of foreign view about the Japanese energy policy or security policy or sustainability policy, because really after tsunami and Fukushima incidents, we are now reviewing our energy policy, and global view is really imminent to be input into the process. I use my slides, which I often use in various places, and certainly it touches upon the IEA's document, International Energy Agency's documents called the World Energy Outlook 2011, and I tried to give you some idea what these findings mean for Japanese policy making. I will start with the first slide, and you can see me with Henry Kissinger. As you may know that he is the founding father of the IEA, International Energy Agency. In 1974, faced with the threat of the oil-producing countries' embargo of oil of some of the countries, IEA was created to safeguard this disruption of the oil supply by creating a joint operation or joint release of strategic stockpile of oil. So IEA is the security or petroleum security body. And we have used 3 times this strategic stockpile release. Now, as you know, in the United States, there are discussions about using it again when the high prices of oil is coming because of the Iranian situation. But certainly, this issue of energy security or petroleum security is now getting much bigger, because after the first and second oil shock, many countries are moving away from oil and diversifying their sources into gas, coal, nuclear power, or renewable energy sources, or of course much more efficiency, energy efficiency or conservation. So in fact, energy security's focus should move a little away from petroleum. Still, petroleum is a very important source, but into the gas, into the renewables, or into the electricity supply, with using lots of different fuels and sources. So energy security in the 21st century is much more broader, much more wide and difficult to provide stable electricity supply without causing any kind of blackouts to the consumers. So to think about this new type of energy security, what we should think about, and what are the elements, or what is the difficult uncertainties which we have to face with. Let's see the slides little by little. There are plenty of uncertainty. First one is this Asian growth, because energy demand happens where the economic growth happens. So China, India, or other developing economies are just using the increase of the energy demand as such, while OECD countries are developed economies will just level off its energy demand toward 2035. So 2/3 of the energy are in Asia. So that means energy security issue is an issue for the growing Asian economies. What these Asian economies should take care of this security issue jointly or separately, or in a more conflictual manner or a more peaceful way. This is a very interesting issue for the global economy and community in the future. This oil demand basically comes from by using the car ownership, how you use a car. The passenger vehicle fleet doubles to 1.7 billion in 2035. And most of the growth certainly comes from China and India or Middle East, while developed economies, yes, grow, but much less than the other countries. And importation of the oil, petroleum, is certainly happening in the growing economy like China or India or ASEAN countries. You can clearly see toward 2035 the increase happens in these countries, while the importation in the United States will decline dramatically relative to Japan or European Union. There are 2 reasons for this. One, the United States will be much more energy efficient due to the higher prices of oil in the future. And also, it is true that the so-called light, tight oil of the United States, which is oil which is produced in the same way as the gas or unconventional gas or shale gas, as you know, in the future. So U.S. importation will decline even more than 4 or 5 million barrels per day from now to 2035. And China is already the largest energy consumer at this moment, but China will be the largest oil consumer in 2035, while largest importer of oil around 2020. And the U.S. declines means that the United States will no longer need to import from Middle East. U.S. can import from Canada or Venezuela, Latin America, or maybe Africa, but U.S. will not need any oil from Middle East. This has certainly implications for the geopolitical change in the region. Of course, U.S. will commit, of course, to the peaceful Middle East solution, but not having to import oil from Middle East may impact its willingness of commitment to the Middle East. This has a very interesting geopolitical implication for the petroleum security in the future. Yes, the next uncertainty which we will face is oil market in the Middle East. What does this Arab Spring means, or what will be the impact of Iranian sanction? This is the IEA's very interesting chart showing the break-even costs for operation or production of oil. That is shown by the blue part in the downside of the chart. The production cost is about $10–20 per barrel of oil. But to break even the budget, or to balance the budget, the price of oil should be much, much higher. And to my surprise, even for Saudi Arabia, the oil must be more than $80, $90, or even around $100 per barrel is necessary. And as you may know that Mr. Al-Naimi, the Saudi oil minister, saying that the Saudi needs about $100 per barrel oil now to balance the budget. And this comes from the impact of Arab Springs. The King of Saudi Arabia must provide billions of dollars for the public well-being. So the price of oil cannot go down. And certainly, if the investment into the facilities or exploration, drilling may decline due to the uncertainties in the Middle East, the impact could be enormous. In the red wording at the bottom of the slide, you can see that if the investment to the MENA, Middle East, North Africa region would decline about one-third, compared to the level of the likely scenario, then the output will fall about 3.4 million barrels per day by 2015, and the price will rise up to $150 per barrel. So this kind of scenario of uncertainty and its impact to the investment will make the oil market much tighter. And there comes the short-term issue of the Iranian crisis. The Hormuz Strait, there are 17 million barrels per day of petroleum. About 20% of global demand goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and also the liquid natural gas. Japan is importing 85% of oil through Hormuz Strait and 20% of LNG. But the Japanese program is getting much more serious if no nuclear reactors are running when the crisis happens. Currently, there is only one reactor out of 54 is running. Because of the tsunami and Fukushima disaster in the power plants, Japan is reviewing the current energy policy, and one after another, the nuclear reactors come into the regular checkup, and the government cannot make this reopen or restart again so far. Government is trying very hard to reopen some plant at this moment. So hopefully these plants will start running in the near future, but still the public acceptance of the nuclear power is very much low, and the seriousness of this Iranian issue, together with the non-nuclear power in Japan, may force Japanese economy in a very much of that so-called death spiral. That is my really serious concern. If Iranian crisis happens, or Israel's attack on Iran happens much earlier than what we are now thinking, then the Japanese economy is really in a bad shape. And this is the kind of, let's say, uncertainty we have to live with in this Japanese situation. Next uncertainty is then the gas is the solution for the security for supply for the power sector. Yes, to some extent that is true. The golden age for natural gas is happening. Red bar chart shows the unconventional gas from shale gas or coal bed methane. And certainly this is a very interesting phenomenon that traditional or conventional gas was more or less occupied, monopolized by 4 countries: Russia, Iran, Qatar, and Algeria. But now the production of natural gas expands to the very many countries. United States, led by United States revolution of the shale gas, China, Canada, Australia, or India, or South Africa, or some European countries too. So this diversity of the source will certainly strengthen the security implication of the natural gas for the future. In natural gas, as you know very well, that much less carbon intensive relative to coal. Of course, it's more than the renewables or more than the nuclear, but still in the midterm, natural gas may contribute to the sustainability as well as security. But there are some condition, because certainly natural gas is the likely solution for the middle term, but the demand for the gas happens dramatically and increased dramatically in a country like China. The Chinese consumption at this moment is the same level as Germany, but eventually will be the same level as the European Union as a whole. So 20 times more gas that China will going to import. So this is certainly the gas is important, but when China is using much more than we expect, so the gas market could be also tighter. And of course, shale gas has some difficulty in environmental contamination, etc., in the United States. So certainly the gas production could be more costlier in the future. Uncertainty number 4. And in this juncture, the very important player is Russia as an exporter of fossil fuel, and especially natural gas. And Russia exported most of their production of gas oil to Europe. 70% or more are going to Europe. But for Russian energy security, as a producer or supplier, how to diversify the customers is their energy security policy. So, and also the production center moves away from Western Siberia to the Eastern Siberia, means that Russia should focus more to the east. And China certainly will be the major player of purchasing gas, oil from Russia. Not yet starting in the gas importation to China, because they are negotiating the price level, and still that's not yet solved. But eventually, China will be the very big importer of Russian gas. So how to connect or how to use Russian gas or resources in the Asia. The Asia is the increased demand center, and how to connect Russia to these consumer countries as in Asia is certainly a very interesting and important key issue for the energy security. For Japan too. Japan needs to import Russian gas in the future. We are already importing oil, but maybe gas by the LNG, or maybe by pipelines, or maybe producing electricity by gas, coal, nuclear, or hydro, and importing the energy from Russia through the power grid line, maybe another very important option for Japan to diversify the sources. Uncertainty number 5, this is Fukushima. Yes, after the disaster in the last year of the Fukushima power plant, how the global society is accommodating the nuclear power is another big uncertainty, especially for Japan. IEA has produced some other scenario, which is called low nuclear case, which means that OECD countries will not replace nuclear power by new plants, means zero increase, and non-OECD countries will continue to increase, but much less speed as compared to the likely scenario, which brings about the speed of the increase or the level of the nuclear power would be almost same as the current level in 2035, while if in the regular or before Fukushima estimate is about 70% increase. You can see in the slide that the share in electricity generation, the nuclear share, will stay 13% in the new policy scenario. This is the likely scenario. While low nuclear case declines from 13% to 7%. But this is to make sure that this is the scenario or case, which means IEA is not saying this low nuclear case happens, but it is showing the impact of the low nuclear usage. Because if we don't use nuclear, means we have to use all other energy sources, coal or gas or renewable. IEA does not think that oil will replace nuclear in the longer term. In the short term, yes, Japan is importing quite a big amount of oil for the power sector by compensating the shortage of nuclear power. But in the longer term, oil is not a solution because it's very costly. So either coal, gas, or renewable. But this means the huge increase of these the demand relative to the so-called new policy scenario. We need about 2 more Australian steam coal. We need 2/3 of the Russian gas exportation, and we need 5 times more of the current German renewable energy production if low nuclear case happens. Means the less security because we have to import more coal and gas. It is more expensive because we have to import more as well as using more renewables. And also we have to have more CO2 emission, 0.9 gigaton or about 66% more CO2 emission happens in low nuclear case. So less security, very costly, and less sustainable, this low nuclear scenario means. Germany has decided to phase out nuclear power from now to 2022. To make this happen, Germany should use energy conservation about 10%, and then much more renewables, and probably much more gas while using less coal, because to match the challenge of CO2 emission reduction, Germany, in this case, should import about 16 billion cubic meter of gas. And this, if this comes from Russia, certainly the importation reliance, dependence of Russia increase, and certainly it means the gas price could rise, and it has impact to the other European countries. So the German decision can happen because one reason is their grid lines connect each other. In Europe, the transmission lines of the electricity are connected very strongly and widely. So this helped Germany to achieve this reduction of the nuclear power. But it's costly, and renewable is getting very costly at this moment. And the German program of using the more solar power in the future means more investment in grid lines, and this means much more cost for them. Lessons from Fukushima. I was invited to the IEA ministerial meeting last October. Many of the ministers told me that, Mr. Tanaka, we don't want to see Japan totally phasing out nuclear power. We just want Japan to continue the operation safely, or much more safely. And we want Japan to share the lessons from the Fukushima to make global nuclear power much more safer. And I fully agree, and we are very much encouraged by these statements of many ministers, and the many lessons which are now coming with the private, public investigation commissions. And one of the very strong statements by the chair of the investigation committee, public committee, Mr. Hatamura, is that Fukushima accident was caused by human error and should have been avoided. And I fully agree with this very strong statement. So lots of things we have to prepare. We made a mistake of preparing enough for the case of station blackout, or tsunami, etc. And also the severe accident management was not enough prepared. So this is a very, very sad disaster for Japan. But we have to improve our regulatory system, putting these experiences into the better regulatory mechanisms or organizations, the training of staff, more security, safety, integration. So international cooperation, we are very much appreciative of what many countries has provided and committed for the better management of nuclear and cleaning up or decommissioning of the failed reactors. But we want to see clearer lessons why the Fukushima Daiichi plant was failed, while not others. There are plants which is much closer to the epicenter, but avoided the tragedy very safely because they built the power plant much higher places, etc. And so it's not always that this program happens to the other plants, but why it happens to the Fukushima Daiichi plant must be clearly understood. Uncertainty number 6 is, well, it is very certain that we are going to use more renewable energy in the future. but can it be integrated into the electric power grid? This is another big challenge, which now Germany is facing. Europe has a very strong power grid connecting each other. And because of this grid interconnection, Germany can phase out nuclear power by, if necessary, importing the power from France, generated by nuclear, or power from Denmark, Norway, generated by wind, or coal in Poland or Czech. So this interconnection helps Germany to move away and at the same time help using more renewable energy sources, because renewable energy is very much of variable sources, means changing from time to time. So to absorb these gaps, the backup power plant is necessary, and this interconnection and making bigger market helps to use variable energy sources. On the other hand, Japanese case is very much behind, because you know that Japan has two frequency zones, one 50, another one 60. So east and west, Japan has two markets, separate markets of the power sector. So IEA has been strongly warning about the risk of two countries in Japan. And unfortunately, our recommendation, our warning, turned to be true last year in March 11th, when the tsunami hit the power plants in Fukushima. The Tokyo Electric Company came into the real problem of the shortage of the power, and they are forced into the planned blackout. So we have to unify these frequencies into one. The cost is certainly the big too. We have to invest to the generators in the future, but unifying into one system is really necessary for the security reasons, and also at the same time for sustainability reasons. Japan is introducing renewable energy by incorporating feed-in tariff system, but to make this system happen, the interconnection between power companies, utilities, are really essential. The cost of renewables are getting higher. Of course, this shows that the generation share of renewables is much less than coal and gas, but investment share is much higher. Means that unit cost of generating power at renewable energy like hydro, wind, solar are much higher than coal and gas. Certainly gas is very much attractive way of power generation for the future. We know that in the United States, the replacement of old coal power plants now happening by the gas and using very cheap unconventional shale gas. And also feed-in tariffs is the issue of the subsidy. The cost of renewable subsidy is getting higher and higher. It's currently about $66 billion US. It will move up to 250 billion, 4 times more in the future. So this certainly makes the cost of renewables higher and higher. This is a very interesting chart which shows the Japanese problem of using renewable energy, because to use variable renewables, there are certain limitations or technical limitations or potentials of using these due to the flexibility of the system, due to the design of the power sector. While Denmark can use 63% of the power from variable renewables, Japan can only use 19 because of the one reason is the much less interconnection in the country and also interconnection to the neighbors. The Denmark is very well connected to its neighbors, so they can use the high percentage of renewable by using a part of the larger market. While Japan, interconnection in the country is very weak, and it's not connected internationally to the neighbors like Russia, like Korea or China or ASEAN countries. So our, let's say, potential of using renewables are much more limited than other countries. So this is our problem. We have to invest, we have to start feed-in tariffs, but not only that, we have to think about interconnection to our neighbors, just like European model. Uncertainty number 7, yes, climate change mitigation. Where are we going, and what does this mean to the energy security? Yes, in Durban there are certain progresses, but still for 50 ppm scenario, which is the sustainable scenario. In the left upper part of the chart, you can see 3 scenarios of the IEA. The current policy scenario is the business as usual scenario, leading us to about 1,000 ppm of the CO2 emission, means about 6 degrees Celsius increase of the atmospheric temperature to the end of the century. While new policy scenario is a more likely scenario, which incorporate the Copenhagen Accord, the COP15 Accord, which are committed by the countries, and if these measures are incorporated into the country's sustainability policy, yes, it's much better than business as usual, but still this leads us to about 650 ppm of CO2. And the atmospheric temperature still moved toward 3.5 degrees Celsius trajectory, and may not necessarily peak out the CO2 emission in the near future. The sustainable scenario is this 450 scenario, the green scenario, which is going down and about halving the CO2 emission by 2050, and which leads us to the 2 degrees Celsius atmospheric temperature increase. But as you notice in the bar chart, the orange part is reduced in the non-developed or underdeveloped economy, non-OECD countries. So 2/3 of the reduction must happen in non-OECD. And what technology necessary is in the right-hand side. And it shows that energy efficiency should play a very important role, renewables, nuclear, biofuels, CCS. So we need all of these technologies to really make this 450 scenario, a sustainable scenario, happens. Now nuclear is very difficult, probably, as I said. And CCS, carbon capturing and storage, means separating carbon and sequestration, I mean storing it underground. This is still the hope, but the pilot plant is not really working at this moment. There are about 8 pilot plants happening, so it's still delaying. It's simple. The cost of carbon capture and storage is very difficult to, let's say, compensated by the commercial profit, because it just costs. So without having very high carbon price or carbon tax, it could be very, very difficult to push CCS project at this moment. So yes, if nuclear is less available, then we need more CCS. But this is a very difficult choice for any government at this moment. And coal is certainly very abundant. And for the energy security purposes, coal is very good resources, but it's very CO2 intensive. So depending on the scenarios, current business as usual or likely scenario of 450, the coal market is getting very different. And who can make a difference? It's China. China used lots of coal for generating power in the past and will continue to do so in the business as usual. But new policies or sustainability policy comes in, the China's demand will be much less and even negative to achieve 450 scenario. But will China do that? Depending on the economic growth, depending on the resource availability, depending on the prices of other fuels, China's policy would be different. And to make China to use carbon capturing and storage with huge amount of cost is a very difficult issue. So if climate change negotiation takes some concrete impact to the CO2 mitigation, this should be the measures to enforce China to use CCS, or giving some incentives for China to use CCS, like clean development mechanism, etc. So, well, clean development mechanism is now covering carbon capture and storage, but not enough. So I am asked to be in a senior high-level panel for the CDM reform, and I'm very much delighted to see that CCS is going to be given a much more stress and importance for the future of the climate change mitigation negotiation. Even with these strong measures of some countries, we are now facing the serious problem, because 6 degrees Celsius trajectory should go down to 3 degrees Celsius trajectory, but emission from existing infrastructure, which is shown in blue, is already occupying about 80% of the possible emission under 2C degree trajectory. Means that in eventually very near future, in 2015 or 2017, if mitigation action delays, all of these emission, let's say, space is going to be occupied or lock-in. So we call technology lock-in happens. And this means that after 2017, to achieve 2C degrees trajectory, all infrastructure of power, or buildings, or cars, autos, should be zero carbon. So this means very difficult thing. So the IEA has started saying that the door to 2 degrees Celsius is closing. Very unfortunate truth that maybe we may focus more to the adaptation rather than mitigation in the climate change negotiation in the future. Let's conclude my presentation by showing some ideas for the energy security in the 21st century. As I said, that energy mix, how to make diversify energy mix is the most important for the energy security. So I rank the different countries by the self-sufficiency rates of different countries by renewables and fossil fuels, and then add nuclear power as a quasi-self-sufficient energy source. And this chart clearly shows that the countries with less renewables and less fossil fuels complement the situation or security by using nuclear power. France, Belgium, Japan, Korea, it's obvious. These countries use nuclear power for securing the sources which they lack in the renewables and fossil fuels. For Europe, this is very interesting. Each European country has different portfolio. Like Poland, lots of coal. Sweden, renewable plus nuclear. Or like Germany, it's diversified to the three. Italy suffers with much less self-sufficiency without nuclear. France, Belgium is more nuclear dependent countries. But as a whole, 27 European Union countries, you can see the bar chart second from the bottom, that their self-sufficiency rate is 50% and very well diversified sources of renewables, fossil fuels, and nuclear. So this means that Europe is seeking security and sustainability by connecting their utility electricity market together, or pipelines, the gas with pipelines. By making one big electricity market or energy market in Europe, they try to solidify their position against supplier like Russia, or using more renewable energy sources in the bigger energy market. So this European model of collective energy security is very interesting, and we can learn for Asia in the future. This is the strategic petroleum reserve, which IEA is major mission since Henry Kissinger built this organization. But the problem of IEA, strategic reserve measures, is that the weight of 90 days of irrigation is declining, while other countries' consumption, like China, India, or ASEAN, increase. So if, suppose these countries start 90 days stockpile, the weight or relative importance of IEA declines gradually, while the share of these emerging economies increase. So without cooperating or coordinating with these countries, the IEA can no longer influence the oil market as much as we do and we did in the past. So as an executive director of the IEA in the past, my major mission was to engage China and India into the organization. It was not perfectly successful, but the cooperation is happening. But at the same time, there's a risk, certainly, that if the Iranian crisis or whatever the disruption happens, we have to work much, much closer with the major consumers like China, India in the future. And do we have enough, let's say, institutional infrastructure to make this cooperation happen? Yes, pipeline is another interesting area which we have to do more. This shows the Russian pipeline is very well connected to the West, while not to the East. China is not yet importing gas from Russia, and Japan is going to import gas by liquid natural gas. But pipeline is another very interesting way of connecting or incorporating two countries. And German decision in the 1982, the Prime Minister Schmidt decided to build gas pipelines with Russia and Europe, and that makes the bilateral or geopolitical relationship dramatically, and it eventually ended up by unification of the Germany. Japan is asking the return of the northern territories, but in vain so far. But by connecting Japan with the pipeline, gas pipeline with Russia, we may change this geopolitics between two countries for the future, just as Germany did some time ago. So, yes, gas pipeline is a very important security economic measures, but it has a huge implication for the geopolitics of the Asia in the future. China is certainly trying very hard to secure the sources of oil and gas. For the gas, China recently made an agreement with Turkmenistan in importing gas by the pipeline beyond thousands of miles. China has not yet importing gas from Russia, but it may happen soon. China has a pipeline with Myanmar already and try to import Myanmar gas or liquid natural gas from Middle East through this channel to the southern part of China. And lots of LNG facilities are already built and under construction in the coastal China Sea, East China Sea, as well as South China Sea. So sea lane for China, as you can see here, is a very crucial interest of China security. We can understand that China is very now active in the East China Sea as well as South China Sea, but we can clearly understand why by seeing this chart. As I said before, the United States is no longer in the future to import oil from Middle East. Will the United States continue to commit the protection of the sea lanes in this region of their own interest or not? Or do we depend on the sea lane protection by the Chinese Navy? This is a very interesting geopolitical question which we don't have the answer at this moment. But China is certainly the very fast-growing energy user, and how to incorporate Chinese into the energy security framework is the key issue for the future of the Asian energy security. For the electricity supply, yes, MENA countries, Middle East, North Africa, and Europe will be connected by the grid lines, the high voltage direct currency lines. Desertec project is Energy for Peace, very visionary, but getting more realistic now, using more renewables of North Africa into Europe. This connects two regions for the future. Yes, ASEAN countries doing their own plan of connecting each other by grid lines or pipelines. Yes, there are some ideas in Japan at Asia Super Grid of connecting Japan with Russia, Korea, Mongolia, China, ASEAN, or even to India. So this kind of grid connection in Asia may be a one part of the very important energy security framework for the future. Last uncertainty is the government policy. Many governments change the energy policy, infrastructure policy very frequently, on, off, on, off. The nuclear power is very often the case, unfortunately, and this discourages the investment from the private sector. We have to have 39 trillion US dollars accumulating investment from now to 2035, and about half of this investment must go to the electricity or power sector. So can somebody continue to invest this much if government policy changes. So this is, again, a very important implication that the government should make sure that certain incentives stay or certain policy stay to secure the needed investment for the energy infrastructure. The last slide, I don't want to go too much, but energy security, one cannot enhance energy security by risking someone else's. Comprehensive electricity supply security is the 21st century security framework. So EU model of this collective energy security could be interesting and important for the growing Asia. Power grid connection, gas pipelines, efficiency measures, new technologies. So we have to mobilize all of these issues or items to make this security framework happen in Asia. And certainly, after Fukushima, Japan's role of sharing lessons learned for the safer operation of the nuclear power is very important, because we know that many of the Asian countries like China, Korea, India, Russia are continuing to use nuclear power. So safer operation in these countries is certainly the global interest as well as Japanese interest. And final point is that what are the new roles of the United States as an Asia-Pacific nation? An APEC summit meeting will be taken place in Vladivostok, Russia. Russia is a hosting country this year. So very interesting time that APEC may take up the issue of energy security for Asia, incorporating all these different elements into the possible future direction. Thank you very much for taking your time, 1 hour of my speech, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you have. Jonathan, I will return the floor to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tanaka. It was a very great presentation. We'll dive into the question and answer session since we don't have too much time. First, we have 2 questions about China's energy relations with other countries. Indira Nasulo, who is an MS candidate at New York University, asks, what do you think about the role of China in building new nuclear power plants in developing countries in the future? And Andrew Ayers has a second question. He asks, what do you think about the future of Chinese energy imports and exports, specifically Chinese imports from power generation in Southeast Asia?
Okay. Yes, China certainly will be a major energy player or energy technologies in the future. About 1/3 of the nuclear power plant will be built in China, compared to the global demand. So Chinese technologies, we hope that they will develop into the safer technology. And at this moment, China stopped giving the approval of the new power reactors, and considering the using much safer, maybe bigger options, or the 3rd plus generation reactors for the future. So it's not that thing, because we need to make sure that China is building the safer nuclear power plants. Is China going to export these power plants? Yes, probably, but they are much busier of building nuclear power plants in the country rather than selling outside. But as other energy, let's say, developing economies need more nuclear power, and certainly China is a possible contender or competitor in the nuclear technology in the future. What is the energy export-import of China from Southeast Asia? It depends on many things. China can develop or build enough of the power capacity within China, or at the same time, that Southeast Asia can develop or build enough of the capacity in the region. So it depends on these elements which direction of the trade of energy may happen in the future. But in the locality, yes, there are plenty of possibilities that Southeast Asian countries build power plants in their country and export to the part of China. This kind of regional trade always happens depending on the regional situation. Canada is exporting lots of power to the United States, but not east-west, but to south-north-south. So this kind of regional connection always happens in the Asia too. So how can we plan for the future is that how can we make the best mix of the nuclear or renewables or gas power plant in the region to facilitate the very good economic development. Probably this is a time we have to plan together where demand comes, where the supply comes. The energy security always increase when the transparency happens. So we need to talk, we need to plan together for the future of the power supply.
Thank you. We have another pair of questions about Japan's electrical grid. Aaron Gill asks, what are the barriers to integrating the electrical grid? Are technical issues or political issues preventing support for this investment?
Okay.
And Mio Kitayama asks, what do you think is a realistic time frame for integrating the grid? And also, do you think it's realistic to achieve broader integration among Asian countries, as you mentioned the plan in your presentation? Yeah. And what are the obstacles for that?
Very good question. Japan, I mean, this 60-50 hertz frequency issue has been a kind of historical issue already. And we are told that this historic situation cannot be really modified or improved as considered, because it could incur a huge cost. Yes, that's true if we replace the generator all at once. It costs 10 trillion yen or 16 trillion yen and such. But if we change one after another, when the replacement happens to the old generator, by the dual generator. Dual generator means the generator which can produce 50 hertz or 60 hertz depending on the demand. It already exists in the middle of the east-west border. The power company can produce either of the frequency by the generator. I mean, this is a relatively small hydropower plant. So to build this dual generator into the fire power plant or nuclear power plant, it is probably a little more costly, but it's technically possible. So replacing, in fact, the unification must go into the 60 hertz because the Western generators are much more than the East. So the cost is less if integrating the system into the 60, that's a Western standard. So replacing the eastern part of the generator one after another by the dual generators, then eventually in a 10 years time, there's a time when all generators in the east are dual. So at that moment, we can decide to move to the 60 and unify. So it takes years, but the decision must be now. Otherwise, this will never happen. And certainly there are technical ideas of connecting east-west by high voltage direct currency current lines. But this idea has been promoted years, but never happened. It may happen, but if this idea is just trying to continue, or let's say the current market system or 9 regional monopoly system by connecting different frequency zones. So if Japanese government is really serious of introducing renewable energy in the future by feeding tariffs, etc., much wider and profound interconnected electricity market is probably necessary. And if the Japanese government is serious to unify into the one system, to use more renewables and to make this market into one and much more secured and connecting even in the future to the other countries, this is the direction we have to see happen. Of course, this is a tough decision the Japanese government should take. This is more technical than than political, I think. But if we don't take this opportunity that the electricity market reform is under discussion now, and usually the utilities are reluctant to engage this direction because the current system of regional monopoly is a very comfortable system for most of the utilities. But future, more decentralized system, more competition of generators, so this so-called reform of the utility market are called unbundling, must happen to make these competition or renewables really getting into the system. So yes, it's tough and difficult, but if we don't do it now, never. That is my assessment.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Nate Aiden notes that you spoke optimistically about Desertec and supergrid integration, but do you or the IEA see any role for small-scale distributed generation in achieving the 450 parts per million scenario?
Yeah, well, the supergrid is very challenging and very costly, but if we have to use more renewables, just as 450 scenario prescribed, definitely we need this kind of network, because the renewables need the huge, big electricity market to stabilize or to average out this variability. And eventually, not very soon, but not only the high voltage direct current lines, like superconductivity lines may come into our scope. And then superconductivity is zero loss. And if it is connected around the globe, for example, some part of the globe is always sunshine. So with superconductivity electricity grid, this is still visionary, but this can solve the global energy problem. So the direction is correct. How can we invest into this kind of system is certainly the challenging political or economic question. But IEA's 450 scenario looks optimistic, but it's very pessimistic in a way that if this does not happen, the 2 degrees Celsius is simply impossible. And how big this investment means to the global community. So a 450 scenario in the IEA is a kind of reality check of the seriousness of the climate change negotiators. So we'll see. I mean, these are the very important options. Electrification is increasing much faster than the demand increase of energy. So how can we make this sustainable electricity future is the key challenge and issue for the security and sustainability of the energy system of the future. Technology is very, very important, but also the strong commitment of the government is necessary to make investment happen. As the last slide showed you, that most difficult challenge or uncertainty is the government policy itself.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have for today. But I'd like to thank you again, Mr. Tanaka, for your insightful presentation. And I'd like to thank all of our participants today and let you know that a recording of this webinar will be made available on the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy website. And also, the next installment of our series will be with Mr. John Leitner of the Seoul National University Center for Energy and Environmental Law and Policy. And he will talk about the climate policy of South Korea. The title of that presentation is Korean Green Growth Policy as Paradigm Shift, Implications for Development, Sustainability, and International Environmental Law. That webinar will take place on April 26th. So thank you again, Mr. Tanaka, and we look forward to all of our participants today joining us again on that webinar and future installments of the series.